Medicaid. It's a program initially designed to help poor people, the vulnerable, and the disabled get medical care. Unfortunately, Obamacare really ruined Medicaid for those the program was initially intended to help. Obamacare exploded the Medicaid program. It flooded it, it overburdened it with able-bodied childless adults. Many of these people could work and get health care through work, but they chose not to do so. The growth of this Medicaid program is driving a lot of spending at the federal and state level, and the entire incentive in Medicaid is to spend more money at the state level because that's how you get more federal money. Take Ohio, for example. Every dollar Ohio spends on Medicaid, they draw down $1.84 from the federal government. So if Ohio finds a way to spend $1 less, they're actually taking $2.84 out of the state budget. This has actually reduced the incentive to find cost-effective solutions to root out waste. But one Ohio lawmaker is looking for waste anyway, and he may have just hit the mother lode. According to Breitbart, Ohio Republican State Representative Mike Dovilla has discovered billions of dollars in medical waste. Dovilla used LexisNexis to assess that Ohio had been enrolling hundreds of thousands of ineligible Medicaid recipients in the aged, blind, and disabled category. Benefits are supposed to be means tested in those categories. In fact, millionaires were being enrolled. If the proper means test was applied, federal taxpayers would save billions, and Ohio taxpayers would save hundreds of millions. That's an incredible amount of money. So Representative Dovilla tried to get the Ohio Division of Medicaid to enforce their own rules to stop these unlawful expenditures. They blew him off. Because, like I said before, the perverse incentives we have actually discourage states from finding savings. Absurdly, Ohio's Medicaid operators are adopting an ostrich strategy, putting their head in the sand. They've literally told this well-meaning, thorough lawmaker that they couldn't verify what LexisNexis was saying about the assets of ineligible beneficiaries, so they just didn't try. Ohio State Representative Dovilla joins us now. So, Representative, how did you come to look for this waste in the Medicaid program?
Well, Matt, thanks for having me. I'm the vice chairman of the Finance Committee this time around, and I'm back here in the legislature. I've served here previously from 2011 to 2016, so I'm not new at the job, but I'm new in this position. And given the fact that Medicaid comprises about half of our state budget, we really wanted to take a look and see how we're spending these dollars, both the ones that you referred to that are drawn down from the federal government, and as importantly, the general revenue fund dollars that come from Ohio taxpayers directly.
And when you started looking into things, what gave you a sense that things were awry?
Well, the information that came back from LexisNexis was very informative for us. That's a well-reputed company. It's a contractor that's been retained by the Ohio Department of Medicaid, and so one assumes that if they're paying for that company's work with taxpayer dollars, that they're then going to use the data that come back in order to actually determine whether folks should remain on this system. And as you've indicated, what LexisNexis found was a pretty egregious number of folks who exceed the asset limitation of $2,000. And so this data came back in, and I asked the department, I said, what did you do with this? One assumes that you would take that and then take some action on it. And it turns out that only a very small number of people were disenrolled from the system as a result of the data that were found and sent back to the department.
So why is that? You would think that regulators would be thrilled that a lawmaker found this problem, this glitch in the system, that you'd presented data that literally was so reliable, the own state government was paying for it themselves, and yet they don't seem to be really receptive to your work.
Regrettably, that's right, Matt. And what we found in the initial response was they pointed the finger in two directions. One, they pointed it at the county level job and family services organizations and said, well, they're the ones that really do the verification here in the state. We don't follow up on the information that comes back. And at the same time, they pointed the finger up at the national government and said, well, it's actually Social Security Administration at that level that makes some of these determinations. So my question back to them was, well, then what do you do in the middle of this whole thing? You're the department at the state level that's responsible for doing this. Surely you roll up the data that are coming back in from the county level and also act on data that are coming down from Social Security Administration and then from this contractor that you pay. And in each case, we didn't really get an answer back. I came to find actually that Ohio is one of only 3 states that relies upon county level administrative agencies to make these final determinations. You'll love which ones the other two are, California and Illinois. Not exactly a company that a nice red state like Ohio ought to be in.
No question about it. That would be the approach you would take if you purposefully didn't want to find the fraud. But feel free to opine on my theory that oftentimes regulators don't want to reduce spending in Medicaid because they don't want to impair the federal drawdown. Do you think I'm onto something there?
I think you're absolutely on. We saw this even with the expansion population, and this was not an investigation that looked at what's called the Group 8 expansion population, which I also was opposed to the last time that I was here in 2013. But I think that's the case for a lot of these types of dollars where there's a federal match. We hear it not just in the entitlement programs like this, but other things where there are federal dollars that are in the offing. We heard this with the ARPA dollars, other times that there's federal money that gets drawn down. And so the argument, a flawed argument in my opinion, is that we can't leave that on the table because then those dollars will just flow to some other state. That's not a great argument. In reality, we ought to be cutting all of those dollars, both at the federal level and the state level, in order to save taxpayers money across the board.
Yeah, and you and I are having this discussion at such a prescient time because in the United States Senate right now, one of the key issues driving the ability to get consensus around President Trump's agenda is what to do with the Medicaid program. And we have some Republican senators that we like and think highly of really worried about any change to the Medicaid program, even work requirements. I've taken the position that Washington is really bad at running the Medicaid program. And if we block granted the money to the states, lawmakers like you would be able to tease through these things and make better use of the funds. Do you think that Medicaid should be block granted to the states?
I'm a big fan of that approach, whether it comes to Medicaid or education or a variety of other issues that I think ought to be delegated to the state level. We're much closer to the taxpayers, we're closer to the people that we represent, and I think folks at this level just have their finger on the pulse in a much more meaningful way for how to spend those dollars effectively.
And final question, it's just maddening when we think about bureaucrats pointing fingers at each other rather than working to save Ohio taxpayers and federal taxpayers money. Have you talked to Governor DeWine about this, and do you have any sense this could be a priority for the administration there?
We've not spoken directly. I spoke with someone on his legislative staff as we were going through this process a couple of weeks ago. That really is one of the next phone calls to be made, along with some outreach to the Auditor of State. There's a role that office also plays here in Ohio to work against waste, fraud, and abuse. And they have engaged in the past in sort of sample audits of this particular program. But there's more work to be done, and it really needs to be done at the highest level on the executive side, as well as among legislative leadership here.
Yeah, the audit is great, but it seems as though you've done something even more thorough than a sample audit. It seems as though you've actually aggregated larger pools of data to be able to use for more achievable but more meaningful savings. And we certainly would encourage Governor DeWine to work with you to get everybody on the same page so that there aren't these wasteful expenditures. Representative Michael Dovilla, thank you so much for your work and for coming on the program to share your perspective.
Thanks, Matt. My pleasure.